Good evening, folks. We've still got people getting let into the virtual room, so we're going to give it just a moment here, and then I'll open the meeting up and get us rolling. So just a couple moments. All right, it looks like the attendees have kind of leveled off a little bit. My name is Todd Olson. I'm going to be the facilitator of the meeting here this evening. Welcome to everyone. We're going to open the meeting officially now. If we could go to the next slide, Monica. Want to thank everyone for joining us here tonight. There are a couple of icons. I'm not seeing anyone dialed in on the phone. It looks like everyone is dialed in on the Zoom app or on their computer. If there are a couple of icons, go back. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Stay here. Stay here. There are a couple of icons we'll get to after we get through the agenda, but just kind of overview of the meeting here. We're broken up into three sections here. We're going to have a couple of presentations, one from BOEM on additional resources, the NEPA EIS process overview, the project and DEIS overview, next steps in the process, and then the Army Corps of Engineers is going to have a presentation as well. After that, we'll take a short 5-minute break. Before we get into the public comment portion of the meeting. We'll take another break after the public comment portion, and then we're going to get to Q&A after that. Just a couple of quick reminders before we get into the opening remarks. If you do have a question that you want to get to, please type that into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, you can type your question in, and if you want to speak during the public comment portion, please get your hand raised. We'll call on folks in the order in which they raise their hands. So I'll get a little bit deeper dive into logistics, but we're going to go to Karen Baker first for some BOEM opening remarks. Karen.
Thank you so much, Todd. Glad to be here with you all today. As mentioned, my name is Karen Baker, and I am the Chief of the Office of Renewable Energy Programs at the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM. Welcome to BOEM's second of 3 virtual public hearings to discuss the draft environmental impact statement for the New England Wind Project offshore Massachusetts. We held the first one on January 27th, and there will be one more public hearing on February 6th. For those of you who aren't familiar with BOEM, we are a federal bureau within the Department of Interior that oversees the development of our energy and mineral resources in the nation's outer continental shelf, or OCS. The OCS extends in most areas from about 3 miles offshore to the full extent of the exclusive economic zone, approximately 200 miles offshore. BOEM is responsible for the expeditious and orderly development of the energy resources of the OCS, including renewables like offshore wind. It's our job to ensure that this development is done in an environmentally and economically responsible way. The process starts with public input, data gathering, analysis, and leasing. After many years now, we have 27 active commercial leases for offshore wind in the Atlantic. As we've mentioned, we're here today to discuss the draft environmental impact statement of one of those 27 leases, the New England Wind Project. Your participation and feedback today are essential to BOEM's renewable energy program and plays a vital role in our environmental analysis of the proposed project and compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. BOEM would also like to note that on behalf of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that these virtual public meetings will also serve as the public hearings for U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Section 10 and Section 404 permit review. We're pleased to have Tammy Turley, the Chief of Regulatory Division of the New England District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who's here with us tonight to provide a brief opening statement. Thank you so much for joining. We've had about 55 people pre-registered to attend today's meeting, and we're glad you're here. We have not yet had any that have signed up to give comment, but we're going to be welcoming your comments. We have a dozen or so members of the BOEM staff subject matter experts that are participating in today's meeting to help provide information as needed. So we all look forward to hearing your comments and answering any questions that you may have. Your input is important to us. Now I'll turn it back over to Todd.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Again, this is Todd Olson. And just a reminder for everyone on the call, we are recording this and it is also being transcribed. So if you do come on to speak, please, when we get to the public comment section, please say and spell your first and last names. There's a couple of icons I'd like you to be familiar with on the Zoom platform here. If you're new to Zoom, when we get to the comment section, anytime during the meeting, if you want to speak during the public comment section, click on that, raise your hand. That'll put you in line and we'll call on you in the order that folks raise their hands when we get to that section. If you've got a question that you want to get answered in the Q&A, please type that into the Q&A box. That is another icon that you can get on the bottom of your screen. Even if you plan to ask your question during the comment section, make sure you type it into the Q&A box as well. That way we can ensure that we're able to answer it fully when we get to that part of the meeting. The comment section will follow the presentations. After the comment section, we will be closing the Q&A function. So if you have a question, please make sure you ask that either during the presentation or during the comment session. I'll have a couple more reminders as we get into breaks before the Q&A session. That'll be your last chance to ask those. If you're having any technical difficulties, that's what the chat function is for. Type any technical problems you're having if you can't hear or can't see. And we'll do our best to try to assist you in the chat function. Go ahead and next slide, Monica. If you are with the media and you've got a question you'd like to ask, we'd ask that you please contact Lisa Eng rather than ask it during the meeting here, just to save time for those that want to participate into the comment section. When we get to the public comment section, there's going to be a timer. People are going to limit their time to 5 minutes per comment. There will be a timer on the screen so you know where you are in your time. If your comment does take longer than 5 minutes, in order to be respectful of everyone's time, we do ask that you put any further questions or comments that you have, any further comments that you have in writing, and file your comment that way. Next slide, please. So I think we've covered most of this. When we get to the comment section, you've got your hand raised. I'll be putting in the chat, I'll be listing off the next 5 people that are signed up to speak. So you've got a sense if you're in that first 5, second 5, when we're going to be calling on you. When it's your turn, I'll call on you, and then you'll get a notice on your screen that you should unmute yourself, and then you'll be able to come on camera. Or come on the screen. You'll be able to come on camera and then say and spell your name first and last and any organization that you're with, so that we can get that into the record with your comment. So with that, we'll have more reminders on logistics and everything as we get into the comment section. But next up, we're going to go into the presentation from BOEM. So next slide, please, Monica. So I'm going to turn it over to Christine. Go ahead, Christine.
Thanks, Todd. Hello, my name is Christine Crumpton, and I am the BOEM Environmental Coordinator for the New England Wind Project. And this evening, I'll be presenting an overview of the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or DEIS. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'd like to do is point out some additional resources that are available on BOEM's virtual meeting room webpage for the Draft DEIS. The webpage address is provided at the bottom of this slide, and if you haven't already, we'd encourage you to browse the additional content available there, which includes posters on these topics in the virtual meeting room. Next slide, please. This EIS is being developed under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which requires federal agencies to assess the environmental effects of any major federal action that may significantly affect the quality of the human environment. The EIS must also provide an analysis of reasonable alternatives and the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of the project. The NEPA process also includes public scoping and a minimum 45-day public comment period on the draft EIS. For this project, it has a 60-day public comment period. The NEPA process collects relevant information for the decision maker to make an informed decision on whether to approve with conditions, or disapprove the proposed New England Wind Construction and Operations Plan, or COP. Next slide, please. So the start of this project's NEPA process includes BOEM issuance of the notice of intent to prepare this EIS or NOI, which was published back on June 30th, 2021, opening a 30-day comment period, which closed on July 30th, 2021. During that time, BOEM also held 3 virtual scoping meetings on July 19th, 23rd, and 26th, 2021. In fall 2021, BOEM received an updated COP to incorporate additional cable routing variants for the phase 2 offshore export cables. BOEM then issued a notice of additional public scoping and name change in the Federal Register, which opened a second public comment period on November 22nd, 2021, which closed on December 22nd, 2021. A scoping summary report, which summarizes the comments and significant issues that were raised during both scoping periods, was also prepared and is available on BOEM's New England Wind Project webpage. Next slide, please. So the notice of availability of the draft EIS, or NOA, was published in the Federal Register on December 23rd, 2022. 3 virtual public hearings are scheduled, this being the second, and 1 more will be held. The 60-day comment period on the draft EIS closes on February 21st, 2023. Next slide, please. So now we'll move into a brief overview of the New England Wind Project. So this project is being proposed on BOEM lease OCSA 0534, which was designated as a new lease back in June 2021. Prior, it was encompassed by BOEM lease 0501, which is now assigned to Vineyard Wind 1 LLC. The proposed lease area is located roughly about 20 miles from the southwest corner of Martha's Vineyard and about 24 miles from Nantucket and immediately southwest of Vineyard Wind 1, which is Renewable Energy Lease OCSA 0501. The project is proposed to be constructed in 2 phases. Phase 1 is also known as Park City Wind, and Phase 2 is also known as Commonwealth Wind. And throughout this presentation, each phase will be referred to as either Phase 1 or Phase 2. Using the project design envelope or PDE approach, the construction and operations plan, or COP, proposes a range of parameters which BOEM is analyzing under the proposed action. So offshore, the project proposes up to 129 wind turbine generators, or WTGs, spaced at 1 nautical mile apart, up to 5 offshore substations and 296 nautical miles of inter-array cables connecting the turbines to the offshore substations. A total of 5 offshore export cables in an offshore export cable corridor, or OECC, from the offshore electrical service platforms connecting to the onshore components in Barnstable County, Massachusetts. In the event of technical, logistical, grid interconnection, or other unforeseen issues, the project also proposes 2 contingency cable route variants for Phase 2, which may include additional onshore components in Bristol County, Massachusetts, which we'll talk more about in the next slide. Next slide, please. So as mentioned previously, the New England Wind Project proposes a total of 5 offshore export cables in an offshore export cable corridor, or OECC, from the offshore electrical service platforms connecting to the onshore components in Barnstable County, Massachusetts. The OECC is shown in this figure in orange. All 2 cables for Phase 1 are proposed to be installed in the OECC. In the event of technical, logistical, grid interconnection, or other unforeseen issues, the project proposes 2 cable route variants for Phase 2, shown here in gray and purple. So as shown in the figure, details regarding the landing locations and onshore components have not been identified for the South Coast variant at this time, which is the route shown in the figure in purple. The project proposes a number of scenarios for which route the cables for Phase 2 may be installed. So this table on this slide shows scenarios in order of likelihood. For example, scenario 1, for which all 3 Phase 2 cables will be installed in the Eastern Muskegon OECC, is the most likely scenario. And scenario 6, for which all 3 Phase 2 cables will be installed in the South Coast variant, is the least likely scenario. Next slide, please. For each phase, a range is proposed for the number of turbines, as the final number is dependent on the final engineering and design of the project. Phase 1 could include a minimum of 41 and a maximum of 62 WTGs and up to 2 ESPs. And phase 2 is dependent on the build out of phase 1 and could include up to 88 WTGs and 3 ESPs. Up to 10 positions in the Vineyard Wind 1 lease area, if not developed by Vineyard Wind, could be developed as part of the New England Wind project. Further, ESPs may be located at any WTG ESP position shown in this figure as the purple dots. ESPs may be located at separate positions, or 2 of the ESPs may be co-located at one of the potential grid positions. For phase 2, ESPs could also be mounted on WTG platforms. Next slide, please. So the turbines would have a maximum blade tip height of up to 1,171 feet, a hub height of up to 702 feet, and a rotor diameter of up to 935 feet, as shown in the figure on the left. The maximum electrical service platform, or ESP, topside height above mean lower low water is 230 feet. The figure in the middle shows a representative figure of an ESP and also a conceptual drawing of a combined WTG ESP. For phase 1, monopile and pin pile jacket foundations are proposed foundation types for WTGs and ESPs. For phase 2, proposed foundation types include monopile, jacket, or bottom frame foundations with either pin piles or suction buckets that could be used with the jacket and bottom frame foundations. Conceptual drawings of each proposed foundation type are in the figure on the bottom right. Scour protection consisting of rock may be used around all foundations if needed. The figure in the top right is a representative figure of scour protection installed around the base of a monopile foundation. There are several types of cable protection proposed, including rock, concrete mattresses, half-shell pipes, and Gabion rock bags. The design envelope also conservatively assumes that up to 6% of cables in the OACC could require secondary cable protection, and up to 2% of the total length of the inter-array and interlink cables could require cable protection. Next slide, please. So as previously mentioned, the offshore export cables for both phase 1 and phase 2 would make landfall in Barnstable, Massachusetts. The ocean to land transition would use horizontal directional drilling, or HDD, below the shoreline to minimize surface disturbance. However, phase 1 and phase 2 would have separate landfall locations as well as onshore routes. Phase 1 would make landfall more specifically at Craigville Beach or Covell's Beach in Barnstable. The 2 underground transmission cables would travel approximately 6.5 miles from landfall up to the substation at 8 Chute Flying Hill Road, ultimately connecting to the grid at the existing West Barnstable substation. Next slide, please. So the phase 2 offshore export cables would make landfall at Dowsey's Beach or Weano Avenue in Barnstable. The 3 underground transmission cables would travel approximately 10.6 miles from the landfall location up to the proposed substation at 8 Chute Flying Hill Road, ultimately connecting to the grid at the existing West Barnstable substation as well. As previously mentioned, the details for onshore components of the South Coast variant have not been provided at this time and would be located in Bristol County, Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So the project has an estimated operational life of 30 years. At the end of the project's operational life, it would be decommissioned in accordance with a detailed project decommissioning plan developed in compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and best management practices at that time, and would be subject to BOEM review and approval. All facilities would be removed to a depth of 15 feet below the mudline unless otherwise authorized by BOEM. BOEM's implementing regulations at 30 CFR 585 provide specific financial security requirements for OCS projects and require the lessee to provide a surety bond or other form of financial assurance. BOEM also requires leaseholders to prepare conceptual decommissioning plans when their project is first proposed and requires more detailed plans for evaluation at the time decommissioning is requested. Next slide, please. So BOEM has been in ongoing consultation with federally recognized tribal nations throughout the development of the draft EIS. So this slide presents a summary of some, but not all, of the government-to-government consultation and coordination efforts that have occurred since publication of the Notice of Intent to prepare this draft EIS. Next slide, please. So BOEM is using the NEPA substitution to fulfill its Section 106 obligations under the National Historic Preservation Act. There are currently 30 consulting parties on the New England Wind Project under Section 106, which includes tribal nations, federal agencies, state and local governments, as well as non-governmental organizations. BOEM has conducted one consulting party meeting to date for this project, with additional consultation meetings to be scheduled as needed throughout the spring and summer of 2023. Next slide, please. So to highlight some notable sections of the draft EIS, chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the main body contain the purpose and need, alternatives, including those eliminated from detailed analysis and why, and an assessment of the environmental consequences of each alternative. The PDE parameters and maximum case scenario are described in detail in Appendix C. The cumulative impact scenario, also referred to as the planned activity scenario in the draft EIS, is provided in Appendix E. Appendix G includes the assessment of resources determined to have minor or lower impacts. Appendix H contains the lessee's mitigation measures as proposed in the COP and other potential mitigation and reporting requirements identified for consideration by BOEM in the draft EIS. And Appendix J contains the Section 106 finding of adverse effect and draft Section 106 memorandum of agreement. Next slide, please. So the draft EIS evaluates the no action alternative, which would be the disapproval of the proposed construction and operations plan. When analyzing the impacts of the no action alternative on each resource, BOEM considered the impacts of past and ongoing trends and activities, which includes ongoing non-offshore wind and ongoing offshore wind activities on the baseline. BOEM also separately analyzes how resource conditions will be affected over time as reasonably foreseeable activities are implemented. The cumulative impacts of the no action alternative considered the impacts of the no action alternative in combination with other planned non-offshore wind and offshore wind activities as described in Appendix E, planned activity scenario. Next, the DEIS also analyzes the proposed action, which is the project as proposed in the COP that was summarized earlier in the presentation. Lastly, it analyzes an action alternative, the habitat impact minimization alternative, which I'll discuss in a little more detail in the next few slides. Next slide, please. But before we get into the action alternative, I just wanted to provide a note on the South Coast variant. So the South Coast variant is analyzed as part of the proposed action in the draft EIS. However, it is a contingency route with limited details included in the COP for review at this time. If the South Coast variant is necessary, the applicant would be required to file a revision to their construction and operations plan or COP, describing the need, describing the need for the South Coast variant and providing the information necessary to complete a sufficient analysis. In response, BOEM would complete additional environmental analysis and relevant consultations required by NEPA, NHPA, and other applicable statutes to inform BOEM's decision to approve with conditions, or disapprove the COP revision. Next slide, please. So alternative C1, the Western Muskeget variant avoidance alternative. So alternative C1 would limit the available cable route scenarios to those that include only the Eastern Muskeget route, or OECC, which is shown in red in the figure, and the South Coast variant shown partially in this figure in light purple. So by removing the option of the Western Muskeget variant, this alternative would limit the total number of potential crossings of the Mayflower Wind Project cable, which is shown here in green, to a single crossing south of Muskeget Channel, which has potentially less biogenic structure than the additional crossing that would occur within the channel if the Western Muskeget variant were used. Because cable crossings typically require protective structures such as half-shell pipes in lieu of burial, which could damage or destroy complex habitat features, by minimizing the number of cable crossings among the two projects, this alternative could potentially reduce impacts on complex benthic habitats. Next slide, please. to alternative C2, which is the Eastern Muskeget Route Minimization Alternative. So this alternative was developed in response to National Marine Fisheries Services, or NIPS, preference for all project offshore export cables to be routed through Western Muskeget Variant to minimize impacts on more productive hard complex habitat along the OACC. Information provided from the developer as well as BOEM subject matter expert review determined that it is not feasible for all 5 project cables to be installed in Western Muskeget Variant for a number of technical reasons regarding the existing conditions in the area, including high scour potential and steep slopes. However, alternative C2 maximizes the use of the Western Muskeget Variant by limiting the number of phase 2 cables installed in the OACC or the Eastern Muskeget Route to 1, thus minimizing the amount of seafloor disturbance in the OACC in areas of hard complex habitat. Next slide, please. So shown on the slide are the resource categories in Chapter 3, and there is an analysis of each alternative by category when applicable. Next slide, please. So as you can see from the example provided here, the EIS uses a 4-level classification scheme. The tables in each resource section in Chapter 3 identify adverse and beneficial impact level definitions for all biological, physical, and socioeconomic resources that the proposed project and alternatives could potentially affect. In addition, impacts are defined in terms of their duration. In this example of potential impact levels for benthic resources within the project area, impact classifications are defined for both adverse and beneficial impacts where applicable. Temporary impacts are effects that end as soon as the activity ceases. An example would be road closures or traffic delays during onshore cable installation. Once construction is complete, the impact would end. Short-term effects are effects that may extend beyond construction, potentially lasting for several months, but not several years or longer. An example would be clearing of onshore shrubland vegetation during construction. The area would be revegetated when construction is complete, and after revegetation is successful, this effect would end. Long-term effects are effects that last for a long period of time, especially decades or longer. An example would be the loss of habitat where a foundation was installed. So permanent effects have no expected end. An example would be the conversion of land to support new onshore facilities or the placement of scour protection if that is not removed as part of decommissioning. Next slide, please. So resources including demographics, employment economics, environmental justice, land use and coastal infrastructure, aviation undersea cables, marine minerals, recreation and tourism, air quality, water quality, bats, birds, terrestrial habitats and fauna, and wetlands and other waters of the U.S. were concluded to experience minor or lower impacts from the proposed action. Discussions of these resources can mostly be found in Appendix G of the draft EIS, while some of these resources are discussed in Chapter 3. Next slide, please. So navigation and vessel traffic, other uses, radar systems, military uses specifically, benthic resources, coastal habitats and fauna, finfish, invertebrates, and essential fish habitat. Marine mammals and sea turtles could all experience up to moderate impacts from the proposed action. When evaluated in the context of cumulative activities, these impact levels were the same, both with or without the proposed action taking place. Each resource analysis in Chapter 3 also includes a discussion of potential mitigation measures that could be applied to reduce these impacts. Next slide, please. The commercial fisheries and for hire recreational fishing, cultural resources, scientific research and surveys, and scenic and visual resources, and U.S. Coast Guard search and rescue were concluded to experience potentially up to major impacts from the proposed action when combined with cumulative activities. And again, the draft EIS includes a discussion of potential mitigation measures that could be applied to reduce these potential effects. The proposed action may also result in potential beneficial effects. So air quality and environmental justice could potentially experience beneficial impacts through reduced net greenhouse gas emissions in the area of analysis over the long term. Benthic habitats, bird, finfish, recreational fishing, marine mammals, and sea turtles could experience potentially beneficial artificial reef effects. And economics, employment, and coastal infrastructure could benefit through job creation and supporting designated uses at ports. In addition, the estimated capacity range for this project is up to 2,600 megawatts, which could power more than 900,000 homes per year. Next slide, please. Thanks. So each alternative has been analyzed both alone and with ongoing offshore activities, and additionally when combined with other reasonably foreseeable planned actions. Table ES3 in the executive summary and 2.4 in chapter 2 provides a summary comparison of the alternatives in table format. On the slide is an example for benthic resources. So alternative C's incremental impact to benthic resources, especially the relocation of export cables from certain resource areas, would be reduced when compared to the proposed action, but would remain negligible to moderate beneficial. A more detailed narrative comparison of the alternatives is provided at the conclusion of each resource section in chapter 3. Next slide, please. So as far as next steps, the comments received today and during the comment period will be assessed and considered by BOEM and the cooperating agencies during preparation of the final EIS. Necessary changes to the document will be made in response to comments, and new information and responses to comments will be provided in an appendix to the final EIS. The final EIS will also identify a preferred alternative. Next slide, please. So again, the 60-day comment period on the draft EIS ends on February 21st. The next steps in the EIS schedule would be to publish the final EIS, which is currently targeted for September 2023, and to issue the record of decision, which is currently targeted for October of 2023. So you can provide comments on the draft EIS by using regulations.gov, providing verbal or written comments during any of our public hearings, or by mailing written comments to the Office of Renewable Energy Programs at the address provided on this slide. Comments must be postmarked no later than February 21st, 2023. If you prefer to submit your comments electronically, please visit regulations.gov and search for docket number BOEM-2022-0070 and click on the comment button. As a reminder, BOEM does not consider anonymous comments, so please include your name and address as part of your submittal. All comments will be made part of the public record and may be publicly posted without change. Next slide, please. So, and finally, to be most helpful, comments should be as specific as possible. For example, a useful substantive comment would discuss the accuracy of the information, suggest alternative methodologies and the reason why they should be used, provide new information relevant to the analysis, identify a different source of credible research, which if used in the analysis could result in different effects, or provides clarification where needed. Next slide, please. So this concludes the BOEM portion of today's presentation. I really appreciate everyone's time and attention. And so now I will turn it back over to Todd.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Just going to take a quick moment here to remind folks of what's coming up next. We do have one more agency presentation from Tammy coming up after this. But just a reminder, if you do want to speak during the comment section, now is the time to go ahead and get your hand raised. You're certainly more than welcome to ask questions during the comment if you want your question to be captured in the record. But if you want to get a response to your question during today's meeting, we do need you to type that into the Q&A icon that's found at the bottom of your screen. So we want to be respectful of each other and our time together. So when we get to the comment section, we are going to limit people to 5 minutes per comment, when we will only call on people one time. After that, we do ask that you follow instructions that Christine just gave on how to formally submit comments online or in writing. So I'll pause there. We'll get in deeper into logistics on how to manage Zoom here after Tammy's presentation. So Tammy, go ahead.
Thank you, Todd. Can you hear me okay?
You're great. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tammy Turley. I'm the Chief of the Regulatory Division for the New England District Corps of Engineers. Again, thank you for attending today and providing input on this proposal. Your participation is vital to a productive and thorough environmental review for both BOEM and the Corps of Engineers. Today, I will provide an overview of the Corps of Engineers regulatory program authorities, the proposed impacts associated with the New England Wind project, and our evaluation process. The mission of the Corps of Engineers regulatory program is to protect the nation's aquatic resources and navigable capacity while allowing economic development through fair and balanced decisions. Next slide. A National Environmental Policy Act evaluation is required for proposals requesting federal authorization from the Corps of Engineers, in this case, a federal permit. For this proposal, as you've heard, BOEM is the lead federal agency for the NEPA review, and the Corps is serving as a cooperating agency in this environmental review and intends to utilize the BOEM-led environmental impact statement to also serve as the Corps of Engineers NEPA review. On the next slide, I will introduce the Corps of Engineers regulatory authorities that are applicable to this project. The Corps of Engineers regulatory program is primarily administered under two authorities, Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. The diagram depicts the limits of Corps of Engineers authority in tidal waters and fresh waters. On the next few slides, I will speak more specifically to the impacts proposed under each of these authorities. Next slide. Under Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act, the Corps regulates structures and other work in navigable waters. For this project, the shoreward limit of navigable waters is the mean high water line of Nantucket Sound, and the seaward limit is 3 nautical miles measured from the baseline of the territorial seas. The proposed work regulated within navigable waters are outlined in red on this figure. This work includes the 5 export cables, the dredging and fill for installation of the cables, the horizontal directional drilling work and exit pits, and any hard armoring for cable protection. Next slide. Also under Section 10, the Corps regulates structures on the outer continental shelf. For this project, regulated structures associated with the proposed project are outlined in red, and these structures include the turbines, offshore substations, all associated cables, and any required hard armoring for cable protection. Next slide. Under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, the Corps of Engineers regulates the discharge of dredged or fill material into waters of the U.S. For this project, the shoreward limit of WOTUS is the high tide line of Nantucket Sound, and the seaward limit of WOTUS extends 3 nautical miles as measured from the baseline of the territorial seas. Next slide, please. Proposed activities subject to the Clean Water Act Section 404 authority occur within the area outlined in red on the figure, and the proposed 404 discharges are generally related to the cable installation and include the backfilling of the trench during cable laying and the redeposition of dredged material within the horizontal directional drill exit pits. Discharges also include the placement of any needed hard armoring. Next slide. The Corps of Engineers published our public notice on December 23rd with a 60-day comment period. The public notice and plans can be accessed by following the link on the slide, then looking under regulatory/permitting public notices. On the next slide, I will speak more specifically to the proposed impacts and regulatory authority for each activity. Next slide. The proposed impacts are listed for each activity and authority for Phase 1 of the project, Park City Wind. The proposed temporary impacts are primarily related to installation of the wind farm components, while the permanent impacts are related to the structures themselves and any hard armoring placed over the cables for protection. This figure depicts the proposed phases and the associated turbine layouts, one of the potential turbines, and the proposed layout of inner array cables. Next slide. And this slide lists the same information for Phase 2 and those associated temporary and permanent impacts. I'll now speak more specifically to our evaluation process. As I mentioned, the public notice serves as the initiation of the public interest review. This includes evaluation of the probable impacts of the proposed activity on the public interest. The public interest review factors are listed on the slide. The Corps evaluates the benefits that may reasonably accrue from the proposal and balances those against the reasonably foreseeable detriments. Our decision on this action will reflect the national concern for both the protection and utilization of important resources. The Corps can only issue a permit if the proposal is found to not be contrary to public interest. Next slide. The 404B1 guidelines apply to work within the Section 404 jurisdiction. To reach compliance with these guidelines, the Corps is unable to authorize a proposed discharge if there is a practical alternative to the discharge that would have less adverse effect on the aquatic ecosystem, so long as such alternative does not have other significant adverse environmental consequences. A practicable alternative is available and capable of being done when considering cost, technology, and logistics. The Corps must identify the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative and can only permit that alternative. Next slide. And lastly, when making a permit decision, the Corps must ensure compliance with other federal laws, including Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, and the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Management Act. BOEM is also serving as the lead federal agency for those consultations. The Corps must also ensure that appropriate tribal consultation has occurred and that we have met our tribal trust responsibilities. In addition, on the state level, a 401 water quality certification and a coastal zone management consistency determination are required prior to the issuance of a Corps permit. That concludes the Corps of Engineers overview. Back to you, Todd. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Tammy. We are going to take a quick break before we get into the comment section. Just a real quick reminder, if you do want to speak during the comment section, now is the time to raise your hand. If you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. And when we come back in 5 minutes, I will go through the list in order, invite you to come off mute, and we'll hear your comments. This is also a good time to get your questions typed up and in the Q&A function if you are looking for a response to a specific question. So I have 5:42 on my clock. We'll come back at 5:47. Thank you very much, everybody. All right, I've got 5:47 on my clock, so we're going to go ahead and restart the meeting. Let's go to the next slide, Monica. And one more, please. Just a couple of quick reminders. This is one way for you to provide comments to the DEIS is during this listening session. We are going to limit folks to 5 minutes. Please raise your hand if you want to get in line. I posted in the chat the first couple of folks that wish to be called on. We'll call on people one time during this comment section and allow for 5 minutes for folks to speak. Next slide, please. If you are on your phone, again, if you want to raise your hand, it's *9. When I ask you to unmute yourself, it would then be *6. I will be calling on folks and inviting you to come off mute. One more slide, please. I'll call on folks in the order in which they raise their hand. When I call on your name, please click on the icon to unmute your line. Please state and spell your name when you begin, and then indicate any organization you are affiliated with, if that's applicable. And again, we're going to limit comments to 5 minutes. And if you do get to the end of the 5 minutes, I'll let you know that time is up and then ask that you submit the rest of your comments in writing. So next slide, please. This is the timer that you'll be able to see, and that'll get started as soon as you are set up and ready to go. So the first couple of folks are in the chat. And we are going to start. Suzanne Conley, if you could come off mute and introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Conley, and I represent an ad hoc citizens group, Save Greater Dowses Beach. This evening, we're responding specifically to the parts of the New England Wind proposal referred to in the COP and the DEIS as Phase 2, and specifically the sections related to the landing of electrical export cables on the Dowses Beach area, which is an estuarine environment, an at-risk watershed, a wildlife habitat, and an extremely important part of the human environment for residents and visitors here on Cape Cod year-round. Our group plans to submit a comprehensive response to the DEIS, articulating why this area should not be utilized by the proponent. First, we want to emphasize a development announced 2 days ago related to the planned offshore wind projects on the OCS off the coast of Massachusetts. The 6 New England states submitted 2 proposals to the U.S. Department of Energy, one of which relates directly to the proposal currently before BOEM and advocates coordinated offshore transmission of ocean-based wind power. I said at the previous meeting, our group is not opposed to ocean-based wind power, but we are trying to stop this kind of Wild West approach to placing electrical export lines. I'm going to cite FOA 2740 at netl.doc.gov as the source for the proposal that was filed on Monday. Such an approach, a planned approach, precludes the developer-driven, chaotic, invasive, destructive, and unplanned invasion of public beaches and small coastal villages and towns with industrial-scale electric grid infrastructure. As BOEM is well aware, the planned approach would connect turbines to an ocean-based transmission system that would involve a landing at 2 and possibly 3 appropriate and grid proximate locations on the Massachusetts coast. This opposed to potentially 18 cable landings, in addition to the 2 underway and the 5 under review on the beaches of Cape Cod. The fact of the matter is that the unplanned approach, as compared to the planned approach, is far more costly and will result in greater instability of the grid in terms of overloads, brownouts, and outright failures. I cite the recent reports of the Brattle Group based in Boston. We ask that BOEM reject the proponent's plan to land cables at Dowses Beach, but also to consider the promotion of a planned approach for electrical transmission from its OCS lease areas south of Martha's Vineyard. Finally, we ask BOEM to consider a 15-day extension of the public comment time period on this matter, given the complexities of both the COP and the DEIS, as well as ongoing uncertainties related to Commonwealth Wind or Phase 2's financial viability. Such an extension would provide clarity as well as improved public input. I did boil down these comments into 2 questions that I put in the Q&A function. So thank you very much for, I do want to thank BOEM for having these public meetings. They're very well done, and they really allow the public comment to be done in a very positive and helpful manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate you getting your questions into the Q&A. And just a reminder, if you do have a question, now is the time to ask it. I've got
Okay.
one more person that is asked to speak during the comment section, then we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to come back and we will close the Q&A at that time. So if you do have a question, please start typing that in. Carl Van Warmerdam, we're going to come to you next. So please unmute yourself and then introduce yourself.
Carl Van, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Carl.
Okay, Carl Van Warmerdam, CarlVanWarmerdam. I'm advocate for the North Atlantic right whale. In the last few years, whales stranded on the beaches of the East Coast have become common. In just the past 2 months, there have been over a dozen. And that does not include the whales that have died and in that time and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Fishermen blame the industrial wind surveys. The wind industry blames climate change, and vessel strikes of the global supply chains of civilization will not slow down. All the while, mainstream environmental groups have become PR people for industrial energy. That stance is mutually exclusive from their professed goals to protect wildlife like desert tortoise, sage grouse, bats, and to save the whales. NOAA declared an official unusual mortality event for humpback whales in 2016, when the number of deaths on the East Coast more than doubled from the average in previous years. Coincidentally, that is the same year when offshore wind development began, which coincides with a huge jump in NOAA incidental harassment authorizations. The claim that this jump in mortality predates offshore wind preparation activities is patently false. This strong correlation is strong evidence of causation, especially since no other possible cause has appeared. It also seems odd that the death of whales are now showing up on the West Coast, just as wind development is starting up there as well. If what we're seeing is what happens during the surveying process for an offshore wind farm, we can only imagine what will happen when major construction begins. If vessel strikes are a leading cause of death, why on earth would we diminish habitat and increase vessel traffic with the construction of wind turbines? Yet in the recent denial of a vessel speed reduction, NOAA said that it was focused on implementing long-term substantial vehicle strike risk reduction measures. Hopefully that will include the cancellation of any further wind farm construction. We certainly should not be increasing vessel traffic at this time. We should be restricting it. Vessel strikes and ocean noise from these extra ships and their sonar mapping is killing whales. Noise interrupts the normal behavior of whales and interferes with their communication. It also reduces the ability to detect and avoid predators and human hazards, navigate, identify physical surroundings, find food, and find mates. Such effects make it difficult for whales to avoid ships. It is one of NOAA's 4 threats, along with vessel strikes, fishing gear entanglements, and climate change. Industrial development destroys ecosystems. More industrial development by the installation of thousands of offshore wind turbines will not solve the problem of climate change. There is one inescapable truth about the headlong rush to cover vast swaths of our countryside and oceans with 600-foot wind turbines. And that is that more turbines get built, the more wildlife will be harmed or killed. And no amount of greenwashing can change that fact. So it is distressing to see the number of whales washing up on our beaches, while some say there's no proof that offshore wind is killing the whales. We must remember the onus isn't on the whales to prove guilt. It's on industrial development to prove innocence. So I hope that BOEM takes these into consideration and selects a new alternative, because there's a paradox in renewable energies, and that they need unprecedented volumes of non-renewable materials. So they are actually not renewable. I thank you for your time. These meetings are very hopeful.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for your comment. That is the extent of the folks that have asked to speak during the comment period. I'm going to pause for just a moment here. If anyone else wants to raise their hand to speak and provide public comment during this comment section. And not seeing anyone else that wants to get in line, we are going to close the comment section at this time. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break again, just as we continue to gather answers to the questions that have come in the Q&A. This is also last call for questions. If you've got anything you'd like to get a response to during this meeting, please get that typed into the Q&A in the next 5 minutes. When we come back from our break, we will be closing the Q&A, providing the answers to the questions that we've received, and that will be the conclusion of the meeting. So I have got 5:59. We'll come back at 6:04. So again, last call for questions. Comment period is closed. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I've got 6:04 on my clock, so we are going to come back and get started. We are now going to be officially close access to the Q&A box. We will answer the questions that we've received, but we will not be accepting any more questions in the Q&A. I will read each question. I'll read the person that read the question. I'll spell their name. I'll read the question, and then I'm going to call on folks to come on camera and answer the question. If we could have the people that come on camera, please announce your name first and last for the court reporter, so we make sure we get that captured in the transcript. So the first question is coming from Suzanne Conley. It's Susanne Conley, Conley. And her question is, would BOEM consider a moratorium on the approval of the portions of the COP related to cable landings on public beaches in order to examine the Bureau's position and possible role in the adoption of a planned transmission approach from OCS lease areas off the Massachusetts coast? And Christine, if you wouldn't mind answering this one.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So BOEM is not considering a moratorium on the approval of the portions of the construction and operations plan or COP related to the cable landings on public beaches at this time. BOEM is obligated to review COPs and determine whether to approve with modifications, or disapprove the COP. Comments during public scoping suggested an alternative to be analyzed for the offshore export cable to use a shared corridor with other projects. BOEM cannot dictate that a lessee use a shared cable corridor per 30 CFR 585.200B. While BOEM could require a lessee to use a previously existing shared cable corridor, when the use of the shared cable corridor is technically and economically feasible and practicable, no such corridor exists. BOEM considered this alternative, but ultimately found that there would be no way to determine if a theoretical shared cable corridor would be technically or economically practicable. Furthermore, the proposed project's export cables would connect to the power grid via different onshore substations other than other offshore wind projects, for example, Mayflower Wind. Developing a shared export cable corridor would not be technically or economically practicable because each other offshore wind project has distinct interconnection points to the electric power grid. In addition, the proposed project's preferred offshore export cable corridor, or OECC, is already co-located with the permitted Vineyard Wind 1 OECC. So under alternative B, the two phase 2 cable route variants, Western Muskegon variant and the South Coast variant, would only be used if the preferred export cable route is found to be infeasible. Moreover, if the Western Muskegon variant is used, the cable route would still be mostly co-located with the permitted Vineyard Wind 1 export cable corridor. So more information on alternatives considered but not analyzed in detail can be found in table 2.2-1 of the draft EIS.
Great, thank you, Christine. Next question is, we've got two very similar questions. So I'm going to read both questions and then we're going to give one answer to both. The first question is, would BOEM consider an extension of the public response period to the DEIS given its complexity? And that question, I apologize, was from Suzanne Conley, SUSANNECONLEY. And then the second question that's very similar, this person didn't give their name for the question. Has BOEM considered extending the public comment period on the DEIS, given that there are two other DEISs out for public comment, and each of the DEISs consists of thousands of pages of materials? There is fear among stakeholders that the quality of comments may suffer given the proximity of this comment deadline to comment deadlines for Sunrise and CBOW. And Christine, I believe we're coming back to you for this one as well.
Sure. So thank you for both of these questions. The draft EIS public comment period has already been extended from the required minimum 45 days to 60 days. The overlap of public comment periods for multiple DEISs and proximity of the close of comment periods was one of the reasons why BOEM extended the comment period from 45 days to 60 days. Requests to extend the public comment period further will be considered by BOEM.
Thank you, Christine. And just a reminder, we are past the public comment section. If you do wish to provide public comments, there are ways to provide those in writing. Otherwise, we will be having another of these meeting coming up on Monday, February, I apologize, I had this open, February 6th at 5 p.m. So there is another chance for you to provide public comment during a public meeting coming up on Monday. Our next question is going to be from Bob Bory, B-O-B-B-O-E-R-I. And his question, this is the first time that I have heard that ESPs and WTGs can be combined onto the same platform. Can this be required for all ENGs? And we're going to look to Zach for this one.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Zach Chilka, project coordinator within Office of Renewable Energy Programs. The project design envelope for phase 2 of the New England Wind project includes consideration of co-locating electrical service platforms, or ESPs, and their equipment with wind turbine generators, or WTGs, on the same foundation. However, BOEM has not considered an alternative that would require all ESPs and WTGs to be on the same platform. And that's because BOEM cannot assume that this approach would be technically and economically viable for all platforms.
Thank you for that answer, Zach. Next question is from Carl Van Warmerdam. It's CARLVANWARMERDAM. And his question is, if the activities required for the development of offshore wind energy end up being proven to be causing whale deaths, would your agency put a stop to OSW development? And this question is going to go to Kyle.
Great, thanks. That's a great question. My name is Kyle Baker. I'm a biologist with BOEM's Office of Renewable Energy Programs. We certainly understand and share the concern for whales out there in offshore wind energy areas. BOEM's currently closely monitoring the stranding event that's ongoing with humpback whales. We're communicating with the National Marine Fisheries Service, who's the lead agency overseeing the response to the strandings. Currently, BOEM requires all geophysical survey vessels to carry protected species observers. And we're also reviewing the reports that are submitted to BOEM from these observers on a regular basis. For construction and operation of this offshore wind farm, similar monitoring and reporting conditions are proposed to be required. The proposed mitigation, monitoring, and reporting for this project can be found in Appendix H of the draft environmental impact statement. Although we currently have no evidence that suggests any current or future offshore wind activities are linked to whale mortality, BOEM does welcome any comments during this process that will inform our analysis of potential impacts to the whales. To get right down to your question, should unexpected impacts occur, BOEM does have the regulatory authority to require corrective actions or halt an activity if such action is needed. These regulations should be found in Title 30 of the Code of Federal Regulations at 585.417, and we can put that reference into the chat so you can look that up. Specifically, BOEM's regulations state that BOEM can order suspension of a lease when continued activities pose an imminent threat of serious or irreparable harm or damage to natural resources, life, including wildlife, property, the marine, coastal, or human environment, or site structures or objects of historical or archaeological significance. It's quite a mouthful. BOEM can then require a study to determine any actions that a leasing may take to mitigate or avoid any damage to the natural resource. I hope we answered your question. It was a good one. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Kyle. We've got one more question before we get to the end of the Q&A section here. Shayna Steingard, Shayna Steingard, has got a question. And this one's coming back to Zach. Is it possible for BOEM or the developer to provide the analyses that are conducted that determine that certain turbine foundations Oh, sorry, it's blocking are technologically or economically unfeasible. So Zach, will come back to you for this one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The construction and operations plan, or COP, describes the technical justifications for selecting or not selecting various foundations. That can be found in volume 1, section 3.2.3.3 for phase 1 of the project, and then section 4.2.3.3 for phase 2 of the project. The applicant determined that the phase 2 foundation types that had been suggested in scoping comments previously were not suitable for phase 1 due to local site conditions, as well as technical and supply chain considerations, and that other foundation types were not feasible based on those same factors. And that explanation can be found again in COP volume 1, section 3.2.3.3.3. During public scoping, an alternative that considers suction bucket, jacket, and bottom frame foundations for phase 1 was proposed. This alternative is included in the alternatives considered but not analyzed in detail table. And that table is 2.2-1. In addition, BOEM has prepared a white paper on various offshore wind foundation types, which might be informative. Table ES-1 of this paper compares the water depths and geological site conditions that are suitable for different foundation types, and we can drop a link to that BOEM white paper in the chat.
Great, thank you, Zach. That brings the Q&A section to a close. I'm going to turn it over to Jess for some closing remarks from BOEM.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jess Stromberg, and I am the Acting Chief of the Environment Branch for Renewable Energy within the Office of Renewable Energy Programs at BOEM. I want to thank the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the ERM, and BOEM staff for holding a successful virtual public hearing for the New England Wind Draft Environmental Impact Statement. We had a good turnout this evening, peaking at around 43 participants. So to everyone who participated in today's meeting, I want to thank you for spending this time with us and for the thoughtful comments and questions you submitted. All of the comments that were received today and during the comment period will be assessed and considered by BOEM during preparation of the final environmental impact statement. I hope this has been a good forum to share your comments on aspects of the project that are of concern to you, and you found our answers to your questions both useful and responsive. Your input is essential to ensure that the best informed decision will be made for the proposed project. And I want to reiterate that there are multiple methods available for you to provide your comments on the draft environmental impact statement by February 21st, 2023. Comments can be submitted through regulations.gov using docket number BOEM-2022-0070 or mailed to BOEM in an enclosed envelope labeled New England Wind DEIS and addressed to Program Manager, Office of Renewable Energy Programs, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, 45600 Woodland Road, Sterling, Virginia, 20166. And just as a reminder, a recording of today's virtual meeting, as well as the other 2 virtual meetings, will be posted on BOEM's New England Wind Virtual Meeting Room webpage. And thank you again for participating in today's virtual public hearing.
Thank you, Jess. Let's advance the slides so we get the address and the one more, please. We'll leave that up just for a moment here as we close out. So thank you, Jess. Appreciate that. Thanks everyone for joining.
Todd, it's Charlotte. Okie dokie.